Success, failure, entrepreneurship, when you're age Gen X. This was a fascinating conversation with a dear friend of mine, Paul Spiers, who's based over in the UK. He runs a creative PR agency, Amplifier Group, and he is the founder and host of the new P&L. Paul and I were exploring something that's near and dear to his heart at the moment, having just turned 51, what it means to be an entrepreneur in your 50s. We went all over the place comparing and contrasting 20-year-olds to 40-year-olds to 50-year-olds and came to the conclusion that there is no need to compare and contrast. We're not better, we're not worse. We simply bring different things to the party, pending age, experience, and what we've been able to transform and learn from the scorched earth moments. So it's really cool to have you here, and you're looking well.
Likewise.
Thoroughly love the topic that you gave us to research and discuss today.
Thank you.
Where did it come from?
I'm 50. Well, actually, I'm 51 now.
You're 51 now?
I'm 51 now. Moved on since we first had this conversation, as you inevitably do. It came from me, I guess, two sides of it. One, equal measures of excitement and frustration of being a 50-year-old entrepreneur, having, in traditional terms, not made it, and not made it being in that very narrow definition of not driving around in a Bentley with loads of money, but perhaps made it in the sense of always turning your creative ideas into some form of reality, whatever that reality happens to be. I was also at 50 quite frustrated at the perception that entrepreneurialism was a young person's game. And I wrote a blog on it last year when I was launching the new P&L, just talking about, the expectation. We talk about societal expectations in lots and lots of different ways when it comes to younger people, but actually there's a huge societal expectation in reverse when it comes to older people, and that is that entrepreneurialism is a young person's game, and I don't think it is.
No, I don't either.
You don't lose passion, you don't lose creativity, you don't lose enthusiasm, and in fact many of those things are actually accentuated as you get older because you gather knowledge that supports and backs all of those things,
I wonder if it's more about transforming, like it shifts and it changes face and it changes expression. I remember my first entrepreneurial gig, age 13, 21, 30, 35, all well-intentioned, quite naive, you know better, you do better type of thing. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of fun preparing for this conversation because I discovered some very cool people and some very cool things. One of them was a couple of very smart universities over in the US have documented in peer-reviewed journals that 45 is the mean age for a startup business with a high probability, over 85% chance of success. Is that right? Is that new to you? It was new to me. I enjoyed it, but I hadn't heard it before.
Yeah, well, I hope it's true. As I go into my next venture at 50, I do hope it's true. Yeah. I mean, that it would stand to reason, I think. You gain all of that experience, as we both suggested. You also, I think, have a more resilient approach to business because mm-hmm. you've seen these things happen before, whatever those experiences happen to be. And I think it also gives you perhaps a slightly more relaxed perspective on those things. And when you do have a better perspective, then you're able to make more rational judgments. So I think all of those things are intertwined.
Yeah, they definitely play a part. I think the idea that we can play in the entrepreneurial space at any age, any decade, and we've got some cool examples of people doing some very fun things, including a 96-year-old who wrote and published his very first book. and then went on to do two more. That we can play in that space at any age, but we will bring to it maybe a boundless optimism in our 20s, maybe a more considered and experience-drenched approach in our 40s. What do we bring to it in our 50s?
I think in our 50s, not exclusively, but I think in our 50s, we also bring a recognition that success isn't defined purely by financial remuneration. So, you look at the explosion in social impact entrepreneurs at the moment. Many of those things aren't about making money for money's sake. They're not about becoming unicorns and, for huge valuations. They're about returning some good to society. And I think, again, I'm not suggesting when you're young you don't feel that, but the more injustice you see in society, perhaps the more you want to make your own personal contribution to alleviating some of that injustice or difficulty in society, utilizing the skill set that you've developed. So I think it's important at all ages for entrepreneurs, but I think you become more acutely aware in your 50s that success isn't defined purely by monetary means.
I think it also parlays more easily into your values or your hierarchy of values. And in your 50s, you may have a lot more clarity on what is important to you, what really matters, and have the confidence and the, I want to say just like blind assertion, but it's not blind assertion. It's just completely free of expectation or society's expectation of you, and just doing what it is that is congruent with who you are. I'm definitely moving more towards that. I'm 42. And it's not necessarily a blind assertion, but as I become far more clear on who I am and what matters to me. So social impact is important to me, but it wouldn't be as important to me as facilitating small businesses to be profitable and sustainable simultaneously.
Yes.
So as I set out to make my mark or my impact in that type of area, I'm much more clear. What's the word I'm trying to say? There's less resistance. I'm not going through treacle anymore. I have got the fire hose out and burnt all that stuff away, and I kind of have a path that's very much mine now. I like it this particular way. There was this really great quote that you sent to me on email, a woman in New Zealand.
Fina Cooper. Yes.
Yeah, I love the quote, but the context with which you shared the quote was also interesting. Can you share both the quote and the context as well?
Dame Fina Cooper was a New Zealand Maori land rights activist, and she fought for years and years and years to realise Indigenous people's rights in New Zealand, and fought against the government, and led the very famous Maori Land Rights March in the 70s to the steps of Parliament. And her determination was that you never give up, you never stop walking towards that journey, you never stop going towards your goal. If you haven't got there, you haven't, don't give up. And I think that's important for all entrepreneurs, but I think it becomes even more important as you get older, because you do, I think with a lot of entrepreneurs, you spend Monday with this great idea thinking this is the best idea. By Wednesday it's crap, Friday it's unachievable, and Monday it's the best idea again. And then you go on the cycle again. Brilliant, crap, disastrous, brilliant, crap, disastrous. And you play it out in your head, and you've got to talk yourself out of this. And that's not about lack of confidence or anything else. That is human nature. And to doubt ourselves, and, the whole argument around imposter syndrome and everything else. And if the revenue isn't there, because that is our traditional societal model of success, as I keep saying, is revenue. If the revenue isn't there, sometimes inevitably you do doubt yourself, but you have to keep backing yourself all of the time.
I was reflecting on that. When we experience when we fall down, metaphorically speaking, in business, but when we do it so many times, the smart questions, quality questions that we could start exploring at that time are, am I developing and growing something that's in the right vocation or the right area for me? And if we are, then who do I need to borrow and engage or hire to help me figure out this little bit? But then the other question is there, what emotional baggage have I brought into this situation that is keeping me stuck or keeping me from progressing? You interviewed Dr. John DeMartini a month ago, for your P&L podcast. I wanted to just touch briefly on Dr. DeMartini's comments in around the area of values, because his sentiment would very much be that when you get very clear on your highest set of values, so the things that are most important to you, that the number one priority or value in your life is the area with which you operate entrepreneurially, and success is inevitable.
Yes.
But if you're trying to create a business that's outside of that particular hierarchy of values, then that just begs a whole bunch of questions. And I think at this particular point in my journey, I think your chance of success, regardless of how it's defined, increases significantly when who you be on the inside and what you're doing on the outside are completely aligned and congruent.
And maybe that's one, I don't know, everyone's an individual, but maybe that is one of the secrets of success of an older entrepreneur. As you learn through experience to become more comfortable in your skin, to recognize who you truly are rather than who you're maybe trying to be, or who society expects you to be, or who you believe society expects you to be. Maybe that success comes more naturally when you're older because you are more naturally aligned with those values, or more comfortable with those values.
Compelled by them as well.
Yeah.
I feel like there's this continuous tapping on the shoulder, or you're drawn into it. Barbara Marx Hubbard is a brilliant writer, philosopher, inventor. I'm really enjoying her work. And she uses language as that tapping on your shoulder is this evolutionary impulse that wants you to co-create with it and through it. And you say that like you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I do.
This pulse, evolutionary pulse, I think or impulse is a great way of explaining it. And we all do know what it is. And there's something about turning into it and co-creating with it and through it that allows there to be this higher degree of flow, as opposed to resistance, setback, and force. But I wonder if a younger person, age 20-ish, I'm not going to say is present enough to connect with it and be aware of it, but has and I know I'm actually thinking of a couple people who are, but I would say for the most part, that is something that you grow into or discover across a journey. Do you know many young people who would be very aware of that evolutionary impulse and already wanting to co-create with it?
I do know some. I think, and I'm not suggesting this, and neither are you, but I think it's always difficult to put a broad brushstroke because everyone evolves at different levels at different times. But I can only speak from my own experience, and the fact that I'm here with the new P&L at 50 and not at 30 or not at 25 is my own recognition. And I've run a number of businesses over the years. I've had a couple of agencies. I've run a design firm. I had my own surfwear clothing brand. Some worked, some didn't.
Yeah.
But I could have had the new P&L at any point, but I only have it now because my values have become totally aligned with, or by the recognition of those values have fallen into place. And life experience gives you that. So I'm not suggesting that an entrepreneur who is 28 couldn't pull that together tomorrow. But I know from my own experience that every step of my life has led me clearly to where I am today. And without those consecutive experiences, I wouldn't have ended up where I've ended up. So it may not be age, but it may be experience that determines where you end up and how fast you do.
You have reminded me of a quote that I really love and use a lot myself, which is a Buddhist quote: "Without pain, there is no wisdom."
Mm-hmm.
And the narrative that you just talked about to describe the P&L that you're working and operating through and with today, Ralph Waldo Emerson talks about this idea. I think it's his paper on self-reliance. He says you come into this world as an apprentice and you leave this world as a master. Mm-hmm. And the knocks that you get as you move through childhood, teenage, young adult, etc., is the schooling that forces, compels, insists on you going through the struggle, the intensity of the struggle, because it is in the transformation of that struggle that you come out the other end masterful. And he actually uses the word craftsmanship. Yeah. You are in service to a market. And when you give them your product, it is craftsmanship quality. And you say, take it, use it for a week. And if you like it, come back and pay me. But if you don't, return it, because the quality and the integrity is there. And Emerson would suggest you don't get to be a master without having gone through, he doesn't give a number, at least I haven't read it in that paper, but a significant amount of transformation, which is experience.
It is. And I mean, there are a lot of modern takes on that theory as well. You know, there's the common suggestion that 10,000 hours is what it takes to master whatever it happens to be.
With that. And then who's your man who wrote the book that made it famous, Blink? Malcolm Gladwell.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I think 10,000 hours is alluding to do the work, get the experience.
Yeah.
You know, I really struggle with this idea about shortcuts because I was properly schooled on this about 2 years ago. I, up until then, really believed that you needed to do the work, quote unquote, the work, and participate fully in the experience. And I was talking to someone who happens to work in the financial services industry. He's a wealth manager. And we were debating that there are no shortcuts to making your millions. He gave me clear evidence that there is in the stock market. Mm-hmm. And so I can't necessarily stand here and say there's no shortcuts and we need to do it the long way all the time. There are. But perhaps with age, you get to more easily recognize where the shortcuts serve you, maybe in the execution, and where doing the work properly and fully in the strategic level or in the creative level best serves you.
Yeah, and I think that may be where some of the issues have arisen in the tech startup market, where huge investment has been almost used as a substitute for the development of hard work, but we'll buy ourselves into it rather than earn our way into it. And you know, we can see some clear examples out there at the moment of where that philosophy may have gone wrong, because there's large S and large losses and so on with some of the tech firms. So I think nothing, you know, huge investment might buy you market share. It doesn't necessarily deliver long-term strength and growth to a company.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the co-working space. We don't need to name them, but I'm just thinking of, you know, charismatic, great personality, visionary, entrepreneurial to the core. Those are the traits that you want in someone leading a startup. And yet you also want the experience, the war wounds, the lessons learned, and maybe the commercial, fiscal respect that comes, it doesn't come with it, but it almost tapers the planning and the ideas that you put out. Because they're kind of inside this tension of commercially responsible and also visionary simultaneously.
Yeah, I mean, I think too much money and too little experience is a recipe for hubris in entrepreneurs.
I agree. I agree. Yes, I don't know if it's right or wrong of me, but I've come across a couple of those situations recently where I was invited to participate and explore becoming a shareholder in 3 different businesses recently. And I was like, nope. In 30 seconds, I could read it and go, no, not interested, because it was little experience, all money, borrowed money, not their own, which is also something else that you learn on the journey. Sorry, I want to go back to that quote for a moment because the context was beautiful. What was the quote that we assigned to her, your woman in New Zealand?
Oh gosh, I've got to bring it back up again. It's completely disappeared out of my mind.
It's about, I remember the end is just keep going.
Yeah, if you're not there, then just keep going.
If you're not there, then just keep going. I often joked or reflected over my personal journey that I'm not sure it was a choice. There was just no other path for me except doing it my way or in some form of business setup. I don't necessarily know if people choose that path because it's not you're laughing as well. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Do we choose this or are we born this way? That's a totally different conversation. But if you're not there yet, then just keep going. If I were to extrapolate that for me, I'm going to get you to do it in a second. I would be like, if you're not dead, then just keep going because this is who you be. I'm not retiring. I don't ever want to retire. This is who I be. So if I'm still alive, keep going. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, if you're I play with it a lot in my head, and just to be clear, I think I might have misquoted. It's you'll get there if you keep going, if you just keep going, as the quote. And I play with this a lot in my head in terms of nature or nurture for entrepreneurs. And,
good point.
Are you born with a certain character? And I don't have the answer, but I do think about it a lot. I don't know whether you're born an entrepreneur or with the ability to take risk and fail and learn and so on. It certainly experience helps that, but I do think there is, success is for most people is a long journey, and you carry it up a very steep hill on your back for a long time before it reaches the sun and rewards you. And it's, I think you've got to have an incredible amount of determination all of the time for those little reasons I alluded to earlier, that there's so much self-doubt in all of us, but in entrepreneurs as well, because where is the evidence of success? You've got to keep looking for it.
You gave me this great visual analogy as you were talking just now about the acorn becoming an oak tree.
Yeah.
And if we were to just consider for a moment the natural ecosystems that operate inside nature, and I'm pretty sure we can all agree that nature is an amazing teacher, and there is a very distinct process that has to be, that you acorn must participate in order to become an oak tree. Yeah. And I think that's where for most of my journey, I've really embraced doing the work and not taking shortcuts, because the acorn doesn't become an oak tree by, well, I can't think of a shortcut right now. It does the work, and the 4 seasons show up. And it doesn't matter how tiny or how big that oak tree is, it will lose its leaves, surrender to the winter, and it'll go through the process. When I look back at my 20-ish self in the entrepreneurial space, I had no concept of going the distance. I was very much in the instant gratification. time. I didn't have any to give to anybody, ironically.
Yeah.
20, everything needed to happen right now.
Yeah.
And it's 42, and I have all the time in the world.
Which is ironic considering we have less time.
Isn't it?
Mm.
But yet we do. So I can take 2 or 3 days very confidently and give my shower and my sleep time to an idea or a presentation, and with absolute confidence and certainty, not work on it until the idea is fully formed in me. And then it comes out, and it takes 40 minutes, not a week and a half, an iteration after iteration, which is what I used to do. And I was still never happy with it. So there's something magical. I don't know where the tipping point is. But I am very aware that how I operate and move today in business is not at all. You and I met back in, I think it was 2013, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that, 2012, 2013, yeah.
We both, like, that was 1,000 lifetimes ago for both of us. Mm-hmm. And it just takes 7 years ago, and who you were as a business owner, an entrepreneur, and who you are today, what would you say are the two biggest traits that you'd compare and contrast from that Paul to this Paul?
Well, that time was, although the new P&L was only launched last year, the concept was developed around that time after something quite dramatic occurred in my business and personal life as a result of an individual and their lack of integrity. So the two biggest lessons I guess I've learned since then is, one, it's never the end. And I guess that nods back to the quote.
Yeah.
Because at that point, what was happening to me, I thought was certainly the end of me as a business person. But it wasn't. And it hasn't been. And there's been a continued drive and investment in entrepreneurialism on my part ever since. So that's a great lesson to learn. And I think, perspective, what I'm doing now, paradoxically, I feel is more important than anything I've done in the past. But paradoxically, I'm not saving the world. So perspective, a greater sense of perspective, is perhaps the other benefit that I have now.
A greater sense of perspective, I would say that is everything.
Yeah.
Because this is not the end. Like, if there's one piece of advice that I could give myself 20, 30, this is not the end.
Yeah.
And I would have had to say that to myself about 150 times. This is not the end, but that is the perspective.
Yeah.
That is absolutely the perspective. And there's this intensity and this drama, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, because I'm very aware that you and I met at a time where we were both having very interesting things playing out professionally. But as I look back on those times, I would have loved to have had a really healthy sense of perception. I reckon I would have navigated that in a very different way, and maybe shortened the time it took to return or rebuild.
But you can only do that through experiencing it, can't you?
Yeah.
And, you and I, as you say, we both,
hence paradoxically. Yeah.
Yeah, we both learned our own lessons, and that's why we know it's not the end, because we've already been to a much deeper end than either of you or I are in now, and it wasn't the end. So how bad can it actually get?
So true. That is so true. I had an employee come into my office last year, and they were traumatized, and they were telling me what was going on. And I remember looking at them and having to not laugh in their face. It's like, how is that a problem? But it just goes to this 28-year-old man. It's not a child, but it's someone with a little bit of experience. But this 28-year-old man didn't necessarily have a frame of reference for any struggle except this one. This was the first one. And so for him, the sky was falling. And for me, I was like, that's at 3:00 on a Monday for me.
Yeah. But when the sky's already fallen in, you don't have to hold it up anymore, do you? And that's where we find ourselves now. So
there you go. Scorched earth,
mm.
7 or 8 times over, no big deal. I mean, the species have gone extinct 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, that's the wisdom of, experience, isn't it? And you can't teach it. You can read about it. You can think about it. You can listen to other people's experiences. But until, and you don't wish anything on anyone, but until that difficult experience falls upon someone's own life and they need to learn to pull themselves through it, that's when you come out the other end bigger and stronger and with more perspective on life. And that's just the way life works. That is where we're at.
You've said something that I want to play with, and I'll play with it very delicately. Is this, we don't want to wish something on someone. I do. I look back on I joke and say it's 100 years of experience. The moments that brought me to my knees, the moments where I truly believed it was the end and the earth was scorched, and the loss was profound, those are the moments that have given me the confidence, the clarity, the ability to operate it as I do today. And I wouldn't change that for anything.
Yeah.
And whilst I have it, we both have it really good now, Paul, let's be honest. We're both doing really well. And we paid the piper to be here. We paid our dues. Mm-hmm. But I love the space and this stuff that I get to do today. And I get to do it because of the scorched earth. And so I reflected on that for the last probably 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I am going to figure out how to write a paper on it. But I want to explore how we redefine our relationship with pain. Because I do not think it's something that needs to be avoided or shunned or put off or be embarrassed about. I think pain is it is the magic, the ligament, the joint that allows the machine to move and operate as it does. And the more deeply one experiences scorched earth moments, the more powerful that person becomes. They almost grow into a version of themselves that you're not born like that, Paul. You're not born like that. Pain has changed both of us. Scorched earth has changed both of us. And I think it's done us well. So I do want to see people having their scorched earth moments and their face plants in the mud, because that's where the oak tree, outshines and outgrows the rest of the forest.
Well, I guess it's where you define the extent of your character, isn't it? That's where you find what you're capable of in many respects.
That's well said. You took 5 seconds to say something that took me 5 minutes. Well done. That's so true. Yeah. Yeah. And the absence of it gives you a lot more runway of character to grow into. I don't know. I think pain and scorched earth moments and failure, oh God, that's so bitter in the moment. I'm not saying it's fun. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying the outcome, this side of it, absolutely worth it. So if I go back to the 50-year-old entrepreneur, there's a wisdom and a presence and a clarity that comes into that business idea that you don't get to access age 20.
I think it's unlikely, but I can only, as I say, I can only speak for myself. I left school at 16, so it's 34 years of working. And in October last year, I probably felt with the new P&L that I'd found, without being too charismatic about it, I'd found my calling, and that's But that's taken 34 years and a little bit of success and a little bit of failure along the way and all sorts of personal and professional lessons. As I said earlier, personally, I couldn't have done this at 20, but that's not to say that others couldn't. You know, I admire some of these young people who they know they want to be the world's best javelin thrower, or they know they've got this idea for a technology and they might be 14 or 17 or 22. Or I never had that single-minded determination or focus, you know, up at 4 a.m. swimming for 200 lengths every morning to be in the Olympics. That's never been me. My ideas have always flitted in and out and made some. I'm not suggesting I have great ideas, but I often have too many ideas. They may not be good. You know, probably the majority aren't, but I've never had an obsession with one idea, whereas I think actually now I do. With the new P&L, I do have an obsession with this one idea and the difference it could make, which is cool.
It is.
I could be 80.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm 50.
You'd be in good company. You'd be in very good company.
Yeah.
So then I think in wrapping up, my thoughts are, there is so much space for entrepreneurs of all vintage, 2014 to 96. I think we bring different things to the party.
Yeah.
So we're not necessarily better, different, or worse. We just have our own flavor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Way of doing it.
Yeah.
If you could go back and do it all over again, would you?
There would be one or two small things that I would change, but overall, I'm happy with who I am and who I have around me today.
Yeah.
And you know, my children and my life, my friends, my partner, my family, and
your surfing.
My surfing and many of these things wouldn't be, you know, for argument's sake, if certain things hadn't happened with the business in 2013, you and I wouldn't have met.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have the friendship we have. And that's one example of many. So I don't try to live my life with regrets, and I don't look back and think, I mean, clearly you think you'd like some things to change, but actually if you really analysed it, would you? I'm not sure you would. I don't. I'm very happy with where I've got and how I've got here, and getting used to how much time it's taken me to get here. That's a work in progress.
Yeah, I hear you. I look back on it and think I would not change anything. Not anything. I am so grateful that I get to do what I do today and get to be and have what I have. And those scorched earth moments are probably 80% of why. I definitely want to have you back. I love the conversation. Thank you. Anything else you want to add before I bid you farewell?
No, well, only that if anyone is thinking about going into business as an entrepreneur, that, you know, it is damn hard work, but it is also incredibly satisfying because in all sorts of positive and less positive ways, you, as we alluded to, you test your character. And I think if you go through life, I remember years ago when I lost a friend and I was speaking to his mother, and his mother said, you know, if you go through life and you don't experience the full spectrum of emotion, rather than being blessed, you've been robbed.
Wow.
And I thought, well, that's a really interesting, you know, that was a personal observation, but that certainly applies to business as well. I don't, you know, highs can only be experienced relative to lows.
Yeah.
And you know, success to failure and enjoyment to being sad and so on. So if you've got no relative measurement, then how do you know what absolute love is, or absolute sadness, or absolute joy, or whatever? So the only piece of advice I can offer is embrace it and know that it's not the end.
That is such a great way to end this conversation. It's those moments are never the end. Paul, thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. That's been awesome. Really enjoyed it.
Really loved it.
Kia ora. Thank you.
The Work That Matters podcast, it's brought to you by ShannonEastman.com.